The first time Nina was handed a belt instead of an apology, she was just 9. By the time she was 17, she had stopped flinching. Their house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place where silence earned you survival and obedience was the only form of love. Jason, her older brother, could smash a vase and laugh, but if Nina forgot to vacuum the hallway, she'd be blamed. Her parents had a different rulebook for boys and girls. Boys were praised. Girls were reminded to be useful. Where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment and subscribe to this channel for more. She'll make a good housewife if nothing else, her mother once told a neighbor right in front of her. I didn't even talk back, Nina would say later, but it was like my voice never mattered. Jason never washed a single dish. He had his own room, his own bathroom. Nina cleaned both. When she once asked why she did double the work, her father replied, because he's a boy. You'll understand when you're older. Well, she was older now. And she understood it wasn't about being a girl. It was about control. It was a hot Sunday morning when Nina snapped. She had just finished ironing Jason's clothes for a party he never even invited her to. Her back was sticky with sweat. She walked into the kitchen to find Jason drinking the last of the orange juice. Did you save any for me? She asked. Jason laughed. You're lucky I don't make you peel the oranges too. Nina stood there, tired, worn out. Peel them yourself, she said calmly. Jason blinked. He wasn't used to hearing that. What did you just say? Their mother asked, stepping into the kitchen with a frown. I said I'm done, Nina said. Her chest rose and fell quickly. I'm not doing his chores anymore. I'm not his maid. The room went cold. Then came the footsteps. Her father entered like thunder. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't care. He opened the drawer. The belt drawer. Her father gripped the belt like an old memory. He looped it in his hand like he was rehearsing something he missed. You've forgotten your place, he said. Nina backed away. Her mother said nothing. Jason smirked, enjoying the scene like a rerun on TV. But Nina didn't cry. Not this time. She stood still as the belt cracked against her side. Pain bloomed, sharp and hot, but it didn't bring tears. It brought clarity. It was over. That night she left. No bag, just a rolled-up sleeping mat, 3 crumpled dollars in her pocket and a rib that felt broken. She didn't take a toothbrush. Not even the one they made her share with her cousin during holidays, to save space. She walked away from that house like a ghost escaping its own grave. Nina stayed in her friend Tasha's basement for a while. Tasha's parents weren't perfect, but when they looked at Nina, it wasn't with judgment or annoyance. It was concern. Human concern. The kind that made her chest tighten. Her back slowly healed. Her side stopped throbbing. But the silence in her phone, in her heart, that never did. She thought they'd call. To scream. To threaten. To pull her back. They didn't. To them Nina was gone. A smudge erased from the family photo. And that was what hurt the most. When she realized they wouldn't come after her. Not out of care but because she was no longer useful. Nina made a promise to herself. If she meant nothing to them, she'd give them nothing in return. No fights. No blog posts. No drama. Just silence, sharp, deliberate and aimed. She remembered what her father always said, we don't hit to hurt, we hit to teach. Nina finally understood the lesson. They didn't raise her to be loved. They raised her to serve. So when she left, they weren't heartbroken. They were insulted. He was the hammer. They thought she was the nail. And now that the nail had walked away, they were left with empty walls and no one to hold them up. 3 weeks after Nina left, the first message arrived. It was from her mother. Jason has an awards dinner and none of his suits are ironed. You need to come home and stop being ridiculous. No, how are you? No, are you safe? Just another task. Another expectation. Nina stared at the message for a long moment, then calmly deleted it. She didn't reply. A week later a new one came. This time from her father. This is childish. No one's going to put up with your attitude in the real world. Come home and apologize and we'll let you earn your place again. Nina laughed out loud. Let me? She took screenshots. Not for revenge. Not even for proof. Just to remind herself that leaving had been the right choice. By then Tasha's parents had made space for her in their storage room. They brought in a twin mattress and even found an old desk. It wasn't much but it felt safe. Nina had nothing of her own. No closet, no decorations. But she had peace. She started writing in a small notebook. Lists at first. She scribbled down every chore she'd done since she was 10. Cooking, ironing, cleaning 2 bathrooms, scrubbing Jason's vomit after his parties, organizing school events she never attended. It was more than a to-do list. It was a ledger. A record of unpaid labor. Of being used. And now the balance was shifting. Not in money. In power. One day, while helping Tasha's mom pull weeds in the yard, Nina ran into Mrs. Coleman, a neighbor from her old street. "My goodness, Nina," she said, surprised. "Is your mama all right? I saw her dragging grocery bags alone last week. Jason said he's got too much on his plate to help." Nina gave a small shrug. "I guess she'll manage." Mrs. Coleman kept talking. That's when the real picture emerged. Jason had been showing up late to school. Her dad came into work with wrinkled shirts. Her mom had asked the church for food support, told them she'd injured her back. But not a single person knew Nina was gone. They were too proud. They told everyone she'd gone off early for college. She hadn't gone to school. She'd simply stopped playing maid. The more Nina stayed silent, the more things at her old house fell apart. And that's when she realized she didn't need to scream. She didn't need to post her story online or expose anyone. All she had to do was stay gone. Because she had been the one holding it all together. Her silence echoed louder than any argument could. They weren't used to it. They were used to slamming doors and raised voices. They were used to Nina crying, apologizing, fixing things. But now, the silence was like a mirror they couldn't escape. And their house. It started to rot. She didn't respond to their texts. She didn't call. Instead, one day she left a box on their porch. No letter. No words. Inside, every chore list they'd ever written with her name. Every backhanded birthday card. The cheap locket her mom once gave her that said, "Just so you know, we didn't have to keep you." Nina didn't knock. She didn't even look back. The box said everything. And for the first time her parents understood. Silence wasn't absence. It was punishment. After the box, no one reached out again. Nina hadn't expected them to. They had lost something they didn't know how to name. It wasn't just about the meals or the laundry. It was about the center of the house no longer being there. They had built their lives around her like she was furniture. Unmoving, expected. Now the rooms were quiet. No footsteps rushing down for breakfast. No folded shirts laid neatly on beds. Nina had disappeared. But her absence haunted the walls. And the worst part for them wasn't anger. It was confusion. They didn't know how to function without someone to carry the load. Tasha's cousin Joy lived just 2 streets over from Nina's old home. She walked past their house every day on her way to work and started giving Nina updates, though Nina never asked. "Your mom was out front again yesterday trying to fix the garden," Joy said one morning. She looked exhausted. Jason dragged his laundry down the street in a trash bag. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Your dad? Think he fell. He has a cane now." Nina would nod and smile, folding flyers for her nursing program. She didn't ask for more. She didn't need their pain explained. She just needed it felt. Then came the news that made Nina pause. Her grandmother had passed away. Not the harsh one who once slapped her for eating before the boys, but her dad's mother, the only one who ever looked Nina in the eye and said, "You deserve better." She hadn't protected Nina. But she had seen her. That was enough. Nina went to the funeral. Alone. No makeup. Black jeans. Hair pulled back. Her presence was calm. Thought. When she entered the small church, whispers swirled like wind. Her mother froze. Her father looked 20 years older. The belt was gone from his waist, but guilt dragged behind him like a shadow. No one approached her. No one dared. Her parents didn't speak, not because they didn't want to, but because they had forgotten how. For the first time it was their silence that filled the room. After the service, Nina stood outside in the sunlight holding the folded program. Mia, her cousin, walked up slowly. "They're falling apart," she said, her voice low. Nina didn't respond. "They're afraid of you now," Mia added. Nina looked at her. "They should be." Mia hesitated. "They say you're cold. Ruthless." Nina smirked. "They taught me well." "They're selling the house," Mia finally said. Nina blinked, but her expression didn't change. "Not because of money," Mia continued. "They just can't handle it anymore. The chores, the silence, the memories. They say it feels haunted." It is, Nina said quietly. I haunted it with every inch of myself they used like a tool. The conversation ended there. She didn't ask who was buying the house. She didn't want it. She didn't need it. She had already burned it down in her own way, without a match, without a word. 3 months later, Nina stood in white scrubs at her nursing pinning ceremony. There was no stage. No spotlight. Just a small room filled with soft claps and future nurses. Tasha sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. Nina didn't invite her family. Not her parents. Not Jason. They weren't dead. But in her life they were buried deep. And she held the shovel. She wore her name tag proudly. For the first time her name belonged fully to her. Years passed. Nina moved into a small apartment. 1 bedroom, a tiny balcony, creaky floorboards. But it was hers. No one yelled through the walls. No one left messes for her to clean. She woke up when she wanted. Cooked what she liked. And when she did the dishes they were hers. Just hers. The silence now was warm. Not heavy. Not dangerous. Just peaceful. She never changed her number. But they never used it again. Every now and then Nina heard things. Jason bounced between jobs. Got evicted once after destroying a rental apartment. Her father stopped driving after passing out at a grocery store. Her mother joined an online forum for family caregivers, and posted things like, the burden of ungrateful children. Let them, Nina thought. Let them build their own story. Because the truth was far heavier than they could carry. She was the one who cooked every meal, folded every shirt, and ironed every uniform. She smiled through every slap. She swallowed every insult. And when she left, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost their engine. Their routine. Their structure. They built her like a machine. So she let them rust. Paragraph 20. The echo. Nina didn't need revenge that screamed. She needed revenge that echoed. And every peaceful, quiet day she lived in her own space. That echo grew louder in their old crumbling house. She had left them with nothing. Exactly what they gave her. Now when she folded her 2 loads of laundry she smiled. It was no longer 10. No one ordered her to earn her rest. She had left hell. And she never looked back. Every Friday Nina did something she never got to do as a teenager. She took herself out. Sometimes it was just a coffee shop with a good book. Sometimes it was a quiet meal at a diner or a walk through the park. No one demanded she earn it. No one asked her to prove she'd been useful. She could sit still without guilt. She could rest without fear. There was no screaming brother. No cold orders barked from across the house. Just Nina. Breathing. Living. Choosing peace. The kind of peace that echoed through every decision she made. And each Friday it grew louder. One morning in late spring, Nina received a message she hadn't expected. It wasn't from her parents or Jason. It was from Mia. Did you know today is your dad's birthday? Nina hadn't. He didn't care. Your mom's throwing a little dinner. Says it's just close family. He's hoping you'll come. Says it's time to put the past away. Nina stared at the message. He thought of the belt drawer. He thought of the cracked rib. She thought of peeling oranges she never got to drink. And then she typed 2 words. Tell her no. Mia didn't respond. Nina figured she wouldn't. Saying no in that family was like throwing a rock into still water. The ripples would shake people who hadn't even looked your way in years. But Nina didn't regret it. She didn't owe them her presence. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. Not even for closure. Because closure wasn't something they could offer. They had nothing to give that Nina hadn't already taken back for herself. And their biggest punishment wasn't her anger. It was her peace. One evening Nina and Tasha sat on the floor of their tiny living room, eating noodles from takeout boxes. Tasha had always been careful never to push too hard, but that night she finally asked, "Do you ever think you'll go back? Just to talk?" Nina finished chewing, then placed her box on the table. "No." Tasha nodded slowly. "Just curious." Nina's voice stayed calm. "I don't need a conversation. I don't need apologies." She looked out the window. "They didn't just treat me like I didn't matter. They built a system where I only mattered when I worked." And she was done being a system. Months later, a coworker showed Nina something strange. A screenshot from a caregiver forum. There, in long paragraphs, her mother had written dramatic posts. "My daughter abandoned us. She's cold. She left us to rot. Raising girls these days is thankless. Nina scrolled through the thread without emotion. Her mom had created a tragedy. But Nina wasn't the villain. She was the escape. The forum posts weren't about grief. They were about control. Her parents weren't mourning a lost relationship. They were mourning the collapse of their household staff. They missed the folded laundry, the clean meals, the girl who obeyed. Not the daughter. The servant. And when they called her ruthless, all Nina heard was, "You stopped letting us use you." So she stopped reading. One afternoon, Tasha sent Nina a headline from a local housing blog. Property on Willow Avenue enters foreclosure. It was her childhood home. Nina stared at the picture. The old porch. The crooked steps. The windows she used to clean while Jason watched cartoons. They had lost the house. And she felt nothing. No joy. No grief. Just release. Like the final page of a book she never wanted to finish, but now didn't have to. In her journal, Nina once wrote a letter she never mailed. It wasn't to her parents. It was to herself. It said, "You are not broken. You were trained to serve, not loved. But you found your way out. And that matters more than anything." Sometimes she'd read it on hard days. Not to remind herself of the past, but to honor the version of herself who had survived it. People often talked about family like a legacy, like something passed down. But Nina realized her inheritance wasn't wealth or wisdom. It was learning what not to become. She didn't want to build a life that needed someone broken just to keep it running. So she built slowly, gently, and made sure the only voices in her home were loving ones. Now when Nina washed dishes she smiled. They were hers. When she ironed her clothes it was for work she chose. When she woke up, it was to soft light and no demands. She didn't want revenge that scorched. She wanted revenge that echoed, through stillness, through calm, through success. And every quiet day she lived well. That echo got louder. In the hollow house they couldn't maintain. In the silence they used to fill with orders. In the mirror where they now saw what they raised and lost. It happened on a random Tuesday. Nina's phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in years. Jason. He stared at it. The screen buzzed. She didn't pick up. He called again. Then again. Finally she let it go to voicemail. His voice was hesitant. I messed up. I'm out of work again. I can't reach mom or dad. I thought maybe you could help. Nina closed her eyes and deleted the message. That call made it clear he still hadn't changed. Jason wasn't looking for a sister. He was looking for Annette. For someone to save him from the fall. But Nina had stopped being anyone's landing pad. She had built herself from scraps. She had healed alone. She would not be the emergency contact for the people who broke her. Nina often passed the street where her old house once stood. Sometimes she'd slow down just enough to glimpse the empty lot. They had torn the house down. All of it. The porch. The garden. The stairs. Gone. And in its place just soil. Flat and quiet. A fitting end for a place that had tried so hard to bury her. Years later, Nina opened her own small care practice, focused on women escaping family trauma. She put her name on the glass door. Nina Foster, RN, Community Care and Recovery. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. The women who walked in didn't need to explain the kind of pain she knew by heart. She didn't need to be told what silence meant. She had lived it, and turned it into purpose. One Friday afternoon she sat on a park bench with an iced tea and a new book. The sun filtered through the trees. A couple laughed nearby. Nina leaned back, eyes closed, soaking it all in. A woman passing by with her child smiled at her. Nina smiled back. She didn't owe the world anything today. Not her time. Not her labor. Just her peace. A local paper once did a story on Nina's clinic. The reporter asked, "Do you have any family you'd like to thank?" Nina had paused for a moment. Then said, "No. Not with anger. With clarity. Because not every story needed a redemption arc. Some just needed a survivor." Nina had a spare room in her apartment. He kept it clean, simple. Sometimes visitors asked, "You thinking of renting it out?" She'd shake her head. "No. That room stays empty." He never said why. But in her heart she knew, it was hers. A quiet space no one else would ever occupy or control. One night, Nina dreamed she was back in her old house. The lights flickered. The floor creaked. Her father stood in the kitchen looping the belt in his hand. But when he moved toward her, she turned and walked through the front door. In the dream, she didn't even slam it. She just left. And this time she didn't feel fear. Only freedom. Years after she first showed up with a cracked rib and a sleeping bag, Nina sat at Tasha's wedding. They hugged tightly during the reception. "You saved my life, you know," Nina whispered. Tasha smiled through tears. "No, girl. You saved your own. I just gave you a corner to do it in." And Nina knew it was true. Nina still lived a quiet life. No shouting. No guilt. No belt drawers. Just warmth, laughter from patients, and long walks home. She didn't write a book. Didn't post her story. But she lived it, fully, freely, every single day. And that, more than any headline, was justice. Her peace had become her power. And her silence? It still echoed in the places that once demanded her voice. Moral lesson. When others treat your silence as weakness, turn it into power. Peace doesn't always come from revenge. It comes from refusing to be used again. Remember to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more.